So kind of in a nutshell, it was awesome, just absolutely awesome. Um, Such a strong sense of being in a family of brothers and sisters with a kind of common aim. I respected the people immensely, on the whole, almost exclusively, and felt very honoured and privileged to be part of that community with a very noble and kind of nuanced shared purpose. The kind of journey towards enlightenment, you might say, but actually, in the Theravada tradition, it's less about that, and it wasn't something I really hugely identified with in a kind of concrete sense over time, but a kind of journey into the present moment, into the here and now, and this is the destination and the kind of other shore, to use the kind of symbolic metaphor that one might travel to, is actually in this moment, and yeah, it's kind of cool. So. So I kind of loved it. I mean, there's 6 years of experiences and friendships and kind of states of meditation and things, that I don't really want to go into right now. That would take too long. But kind of one experience I'll just touch upon to give a sense. So my last year in Sri Lanka, I was doing the charika. I mentioned it in earlier episodes. I was kind of wandering around and from village to village in the kind of central mountainous part of Sri Lanka. And I kind of knew that it was a bit unsafe. I'd been advised against it by Sri Lankan monks, and there was a civil war happening. But and I'd kind of been in a couple of kind of hair-raising situations already. And anyway, this particular morning, I was walking through this village, and I was in my robes, my kind of ochre monastic robes, and I had a bowl, and I was walking through the village slowly, like I'd done many, many times before with Sri Lankan monks, previously, when I was in a monastery, and you just expect, that you're in a Buddhist, the kind of major kind of group, racial group in Sri Lanka, kind of Sinhalese, Buddhist, and as in the Buddhist, that Sinhalese part of the country. So you'd expect the villagers would know what you were doing, and it's happened many times before, and they see you, and okay, well, there's a monk coming through on the alms round to the Pindapata, and they'd come out and they'd put some food in your bowl, and you'd be grateful, and you'd say thanks. In the Sinhalese culture, you'd chant a little kind of words of thanks, and you go on your way. So I was kind of doing this as I'd done many times before, and I was walking through the village, and then there was a sort of kind of house with a kind of fence, and somebody in the morning, as very common, sweeping the kind of leaves off the front kind of garden area, and this lady who was doing the sweeping kind of looked up and screamed when she saw me, and kind of dropped what she was carrying, and ran into the house and kind of dwelling, and then she came out after a minute with kind of what I assumed would be her grandmother, and I was this kind of relatively young woman. And then the grandmother started shouting at me, and she kind of picked something up that was kind of akin to a scythe or something of that nature. It was kind of paddy fields nearby, something to do with rice farming, I guess, but this kind of implement with a big blade on the end, and kind of came towards me, swinging the blade and shouting at me in Sinhalese. And I spoke a little bit of Sinhalese, but I didn't really understand what she was saying. So kind of I'm in this situation, and I'm thinking, okay, as a monk, my kind of practice is to be mindful and to be calm, and practice the kind of emanation of loving kindness, feelings of loving kindness and peace, and that's part of the job description of being a Buddhist monk. So I was there, and I was kind of saying in Sinhalese, kind of, it's okay, I'm a foreign monk, a white monk, I'm on the alms round, and Mata Suruhamdra, and a foreign monk, and then I kind of two women were still kind of seemed clearly very agitated. And then I looked around and I realised this kind of was at the bottom of a steep kind of bank, and there were further kind of huts, kind of going up the bank. And I saw these kind of groups of men kind of running down, bounding down, responding to these women shouting, and some of them had machetes in their hands, kind of descending on me. And so I just thought, okay, this is my kind of a situation, and I've got an opportunity to kind of respond in a kind of appropriate way. So I kind of lowered my eyes to the ground and I started chanting calmly and quietly in Sinhalese, kind of, I wish you well, I wish you freedom from suffering, I wish you, kind of well-being. So and it's kind of and then eventually one of these guys kind of came up to me and kind of, I think, touched me on the arm or something. Turned around, started shouting at everybody, and a kind of argument ensued. And then they kind of, these village people pulled the original, the older lady and I presume was the granddaughter, forward, and then they started crying. And then the kind of group of them, maybe kind of 20 plus 30 people, kind of got on their knees, and then more people started crying, and they started bowing to me, and then it dawned on me, what had happened. And I don't know if you figured it out already, but this is my kind of interpretation. At the time, I felt pretty sure I was right, and even now I think I was right, but I'm 99% sure. My conclusion was that they'd thought I was a demon or a ghost of some kind. They'd never seen a white Buddhist monk before. I presumed. There weren't many Buddhist monks. There's a few with white skin. So, and they thought that, and they thought it was like a kind of visitation. So, and then a few people came up, and I was kind of clearly wasn't harbouring any ill will to them at all. And I sat down, and they brought me some food, and then the old lady and the granddaughter were there, and I did some chanting, and they, have their hands, and there's kind of gesture and kind of a seat of it, and of course in that culture, if you're kind of an act of kindness to someone in monastic robes, is there's a kind of belief that that's kind of would be a cause of good karma, that good things would happen in the future for that kind of act of generosity. So they kind of thought of attacking a Buddhist monk, or kind of killing them, an actual Buddhist monk, not a ghost. So that was a really bad karma. So so I kind of spent some time with them, and spoke a little bit of Sinhalese and some chanting, and until they kind of calmed down and reassured. I think maybe just one person spoke English, and that's kind of reassuring, say to that there's absolutely no harm done, and it's kind of maybe there was a conversation about that they thought I was a ghost, and and then I kind of left, and as I was walking away, I thought this is kind of remarkable, because this whole situation wasn't something that really me, as my personality and my background, was really, that wasn't the kind of key issue there at all. The thing that was happening was that there was a kind of a Buddhist tradition. In that particular time, me, this body, this mind, was inhabiting those robes. I was in that situation, in that country, in that traditional format of the arms round. Something happened, and I was able to kind of inhabit in a good enough fashion the role of being a monk, and bring some calm and peace and perspective and kindness into those people's lives, even when they kind of initially it kind of didn't look like it was going to go that way. And I kind of felt remarkable kind of privilege and joy to have been able to inhabit that, the robe, and be able to bring kind of into the situation the qualities that are becoming of a monk, somebody who, and of course, nun, it would be the same for being a nun. I say that because in Buddhism, their traditional Buddhism, Theravada tradition, in the main, there isn't kind of the quality for women in the monastic order that I and many other people would consider appropriate in this day and age, certainly, if in fact, kind of historically too. But yeah, it's kind of becoming of a monastic, and being in that kind of role, being in that kind of form, that tradition, etc., really lifts you up. And it's a kind of great privilege, and I kind of loved it.